Welcome to Oldex, Codex Armageddon. Listeners have requested I do Old Eldar and Old Orc codexes. While an Old Eldar codex is on the way, courtesy of eBay, I have not been able to find an Old Orc codex within my budget, which is close to sod all. If you would like to donate an Old Orc codex, please listen to the very end of the podcast with information on how to contact me, or go into the show notes, where that information is also available. At a pinch, simply tweet me, at RJ Bailey. Spelt weirdly, thanks to my ancestors. RJBAYLEY. Not only is Codex Armageddon probably the codex which made me really fall in love with Warhammer 40,000, it also contains some orcs. I hope that will hold over those who have requested an Orc edition of Oldex. Please enjoy the fiction from Codex Armageddon. I Pray. Codex Armageddon. Written by Andy Chambers, Jervis Johnson, and Gavin Thorpe. Page 1. Narrated by R.J. Bailey. Armageddon. A world whose name is known across the Imperium. Armageddon. A world whose name has become a byword for war and destruction on a massive scale. Armageddon, where the fate of 1,000 worlds hangs in the balance. Lord Commander Solar Eugenian. General Titus stood upon the observation platform above the bridge of his Leviathan command vehicle. Here, 60 feet above the ash dunes, the wind was fierce, and his protective cape whipped around him. He took a pair of magnoculars from an aide and observed the massive force arrayed under his command. The strategic displays of the command center could not convey the sheer majesty of the army. To his left strode 5 massive warlord battle titans of the Iron Skulls Legion, kill pennants fluttering in the wind, and in front of them 4 warhound scout titans stalked across the orange-red ash wastes. Around the feet of the huge titans advanced 3 full regiments of the Armageddon Steel Legion. A dozen companies of Lehman Russ tanks, dwarfed by the huge war engines that blotted out the faint light of Armageddon, plowed towards their objective, the bridges over the river Styges, trailing a massive dust cloud in their wake. Gigantic Baneblade and Shadow Sword super-heavy tanks lumbered to his right, a heavily armored reserve ready to move forward and unleash the awesome firepower of their massed battle cannons and volcano cannons. And all around were the men and vehicles of the Steel Legion. Chimera transports beyond counting, 30,000 men riding inside, accompanied by more tanks and batteries of artillery. An adjutant directed the general's gaze to the south, where the orcs were said to be mustering after making planetfall. Adjusting the focus of his magnoculars, Titus gave a gasp of disbelief. There were the orcs. The shapes of a dozen gargants jutted up from the undulating ash wastes, a swarm of smaller vehicles surrounding them. But it was not this that had given Titus such a shock. For miles in every direction around the gargants, the ash desert was green, a sea of orcs so massive that the mind refused to acknowledge the possibility. Titus examined his forces once more, his heart in his throat. "Emperor's mercy," he whispered to himself. "I pray I have enough men to face that." You have been listening to I Pray. Codex Armageddon. Page 1. Codex Armageddon was written by Andy Chambers, Jervis Johnson, and Gavin Thorpe, and narrated by R.J. Bailey. Thank you to Andy Chambers, Jervis Johnson, and Gav Thorpe for writing the fiction I grew up with. If you've enjoyed this, Please leave a review where you found it, or like, share, and subscribe on YouTube, depending how you're listening. This production, like all of Oldex, is entirely unofficial and uncommercial, from an out-of-print publication, is a derivative work with all copyrights owned by Games Workshop, and is a celebration of the hobby and lore I grew up with. If you have suggestions for other old Codex fiction for me to narrate on this podcast, you can comment, contact me on Twitter at rjbailey, or email robertjbailey@gmail.com. Links are in the show description.